Mr. President.
Senate's in a quorum call.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with and permission to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection. Senator from Florida.
Mr. President, I'm here to speak about the recent decision of the Obama administration to bring 5 terrorists allegedly responsible and who have admitted for being responsible for planning and executing the 9/11 attacks and having them tried in a civil court in New York. This is the group of terrorists which includes Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 other alleged 9/11 plotters. And the reason I stand here before you today, Mr. President, is to really ask the question, why? Why are we bringing enemy combatants, terrorists, to trial in a civil venue in New York? The decision of the Attorney General to me, Mr. President, does not make sense. It is not sound in terms of our historical precedent for these type of hearings, and it puts our national security at risk for the future. Criminal trials for terrorists are different and should be different than the criminal trials of those who commit crimes here in this country. After all, we afford our citizens who commit crimes the presumption of innocence. It is part of the bargain that we have with our citizens that we will not presume them guilty. We afford them rights, rights that are set forth in our Bill of Rights, rights that are guaranteed constitutionally. We do not guarantee these rights for people who are not United States citizens. More importantly, we do not guarantee these rights for terrorists who attack our country in an act of war. Mr. President, right now we are fighting this war in 2 theaters, in Afghanistan and Iraq. These are enemy combatants. They are not United States citizens. They were not resident in the United States when they committed this crime. Now, Mr. President, as a matter of point, I'd like to go through the rights that we afford the criminally accused in a normal criminal prosecution in this country, and to show why they are not suited for a terrorist. We extend the right to remain silent, the right to have that silence not used against you, the right to choose between a public trial before a public judge or jury, the right to summon and compel the attendance of witnesses to testify upon the accused's behalf, the right to a speedy trial, the right to see all the evidence collected against the accused, the right to learn how the evidence was collected, and the right to appeal not only the verdict, but almost every ruling a judge performs in the case. Why, Mr. President, are we extending these rights to enemy combatants who killed nearly 3,000 innocents on 9/11 through an act of war? Now, they didn't wear a military uniform, and the planes that were flown were not the planes of foreign countries with foreign flags. But there is no difference between the war that we're in with them than in the wars that we've been against other countries. And the precedent of what may happen when we afford these rights to these terrorists is not good. Attorney General Michael Mukasey, our former Attorney General, talked about what happened when we tried terrorist trials in civil courts before, in the United States criminal courts. In the trial of Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, a part of testimony which we thought was innocuous at the time that came out in the public courtroom talked about the delivery of a cell phone battery. And it tipped off the terrorists still at large that one of their communication links had been compromised. And Mukasey said that that link, which in fact had been monitored by the government and had provided enormous valuable intelligence, was immediately shut down and lost in our war on terror. Mukasey also noted in the multi-defendant terrorism prosecution for Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, also known as the Blind Sheikh, for his role in the 93 Trade Center bombings, the government was required to disclose, as it does in a conspiracy case, the names of the unindicted co-conspirators, one of whom was Osama bin Laden. So we are giving information in these public trials, which were never meant for terrorism, or were never meant for people we are at war at, information that may be used against us in a future terrorist attack. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of this? We have military tribunals to perform this function. And this is not something new to this country, Mr. President. We've been using military tribunals since the time of George Washington. He used it during the American Revolution to deal with British spies. and none other than Franklin Delano Roosevelt used them in World War II. We had 8 German agents who snuck ashore with the intent to plant explosives at railroad facilities and bridges. Roosevelt used military tribunals to try and convict those Germans who came across in World War II, and the Supreme Court upheld it. So this is not something new, these military tribunals. They have to be done right. They have to give due process. We used them against the driver of Osama bin Laden, and one of the charges was dismissed against him. So they are a fair process. Why are we bringing the 9/11 terrorists to a criminal court in New York? These are not bank robbers. These are people we are at war with. Why are we affording them extra rights? Why are we affording them extra rights when the information that's revealed during the discovery process in federal court may compromise our national security and lead to additional terrorist attacks? Why are we doing this? Doesn't make any sense to me, Mr. President. It defies history, and it's going to present and possibly provide future challenges to our national security. Finally, Mr. President, let's think about what these trials are going to be like. We are giving these terrorists an international reality show where they're going to be able to have a platform each and every day to talk about their war against our country and our values. I want to quote from David Brooks in his column in the Washington Post. He said, "Terrorism is an act of propaganda. So now Khalid Sheikh Mohammed gets to commit the original act of propaganda, which was the attack, and now he's going to have a long trial and this international reality show, which will be followed here, but more importantly, followed around the world. So he's getting a second bite at the apple at spreading his propaganda message." And Mr. President, what happens if, because of all of the rights that are afforded to a person who's tried in a criminal court in the United States, what happens if, because of one of those rights and all of the presumptions there are against being found guilty, presumptions that we afford to our citizens because they are part of our constitutional democracy, what happens if Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, is acquitted on a technicality? Then what? What are we going to do with him? Are we going to release him? Are we going to let him off in the streets in New York? I don't think so. Then we're going to hold him again. And what is that going to say to the international community? He had a trial, he was acquitted, but we're still going to hold him because we think it's a threat? Boy, that's going to really backfire on this administration. So, Mr. President, in conclusion, I can't understand why we're doing this. I can't understand when we have a historical precedent of a military tribunal that we've used since the time of George Washington, that we used during World War II, why we are going to bring these terrorists who killed or were responsible for killing nearly 3,000 innocents on September 11th, why we are going to try them in federal court as criminals and not understand what they truly are, which are terrorists with whom which we are at war. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.